we didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but we knew that we had to carry that movement forward. As a lot of information has been written about the Freedom Rides and the movies, so I'm going to stick to the things that are not covered in the literature and the films. Okay, so the core approach to dealing with it, segregation in the Freedom Rides, was to come and test to see if the Supreme Court ruling, that is Boynton versus the Commonwealth of Virginia. This was a Howard University law student who happened to be the son of Mrs. Amelia Boynton, which you'll hear a lot about in the Selma movement. Okay? Her son happened to have been a law student, and he decided to use the facility and test that facility in Virginia. And he was arrested. And that was appealed. He was a law student, okay? And who do you think was his professors there and his mentors and that kind of thing? This Thurgood Marshall, okay? So, this is one that, and Howard University Law School was really based on teaching constitutional law. So if you wanted to be a constitutional lawyer, that's where you went. Okay, Howard University. Well, the main purpose of the Freedom Ride was to test the Supreme Court decision to see if it was being followed. Obviously, it was not, because at that point they still had signs on the bus station giving separate entrance to blacks in the waiting rooms and separate restrooms, separate cafeteria, eating rooms, okay? And you can imagine 4 restrooms in this little bus station, okay? One for colored, one for colored men, Now, in some cases, people economized, and rather than having 4 restrooms, they had for colored, and that was for both sex, both genders, okay? So usually when the women had to go to the restroom, they always went in pairs. By the way, that's why y'all go in pairs. They didn't realize, why. I mean, they just a habit of doing that. But that was the reason why. It was part of a culture. And one woman would stand outside, okay, while the other one would go inside. So they would let know that a woman was using the colored restroom. The men couldn't wait that long, so they used to find a tree or a car tire or somewhere, around the back. Okay, follow the dogs. Okay. Otherwise, they would shout at the women and tell them to hurry up, that kind of thing. So they were always generous. But anyway, skipping all that stuff. There were 2 buses that Corps had. One was Greyhound and one was Trailways. It was the Greyhound bus that came into Anniston, Alabama and got burned. And the Trailway bus came into Birmingham. And they pulled them off the bus and beat them up. That's why you saw the fella laying down with all the, it took something like 50 stitches in his head. That was Peck. And by the way, he was the heir of Peck and Peck, that big in New York. Okay, that big corporation, and department stores and everything. Peck and Peck. Now, the point I wanted to make on the original Freedom Ride, as it were, on the rest of it, you had people who represented different classes. Okay? I mean, that's about as upper class as you can get. That was the heir of Peck and Peck. I'm talking about millionaires. You had one woman on there who was an actress, Hollywood actress. Okay? So, Corps believed in using small groups of influential people and being able to make a case because they would draw support from other folk. That's why the musicians and the actors and all those people who got involved in the movement brought a tremendous support for us. Okay, because people respected them, and they had a lot of influence, like Harry Belafonte and many of the others. Okay, you know, Frank Sinatra and all that. You know, Sammy Davis Jr. All right. Okay, so in that original bus ride, what it said was that whites had to sit in the front, blacks had to sit in the back. So that meant that whites did not have the freedom to choose where they would sit. That was denying white folks their rights. You know, free, white, and 21 was the mantra, okay? If you're free, white, and 21, you could do anything you want, all right? Okay, so they use that as a test case. Now, the difference between that original Freedom Ride and when the students from Nashville took up the ride was that we were not testing, okay? We were not going because we were trying to get a court case, all right? We were going to actually attract many of the students who have been involved in the sit-ins to come and just start using the facility. Because a lot of the black students and whites, that's how they traveled. They didn't have cars like we have today, you know. And we used the bus, and the train, you know, to go back and forth to school or wherever we had to go for the summer or whatever. Okay, much more than they do now. A lot of people fly today. All those people with the airports and stuff, they were originally at bus stations. All right, yeah. So the point we're making is that that was a common mode of transportation. So we were just going on the bus and riding, okay, in mass. It's called massive civil disobedience. So we weren't worried about whether or not we had raised the bond money before we went, okay? Or we had secured the lawyers. We went and took the action, and then we decided, okay, how would we respond to the treatment we got. So here at this bus station, for example, after Birmingham,
it's all right.
That's okay. We no longer needed parental permission on the core group because it was an organization established. Any students who were under 21 had to have parental permission. And I was scheduled to go on the original ride, but my parents wouldn't give me parental permission because they decided that
Too dangerous.
they wouldn't. My father said, you know, I'm not going to sign your death warrant. Okay, so that meant I couldn't go on the original ride. But once the Freedom Ride got stopped, and because of the violence, and they were trying to find a cooling off period, that's what they were asking Robert Kennedy. Say, if y'all can just cool off for a while, we're trying to get you some protection, okay, from these southern governors and stuff like that. Because, you know, it's nothing we can do because we don't want to usurp our power from the federal government to give, you know, take away the law enforcement authority of the state and local governments in the South. Besides, they were trying to court, you know, the Democratic ticket, you know, and you have a lot of Democrats in the South. They didn't want to interfere with the concept of states' rights. So the state rights had to do with whether or not each state could discriminate against people and based on race. And the other issue was about federal protection. So these, as you saw in the film, Patterson said that he just lied, said he wasn't available and that kind of thing. One is that while the United States government, like the president and attorney general, didn't want to interfere with states' rights, or looked like they were usurping and trying to take over. Okay, but that would only be met with resistance. All right, like we are a United States of America, but United States, but we're not totally the same. You could drive anywhere in the United States, but you only get your license in one state, your driver's license. Why don't they have a driver's license for the United States? And each of the tests are different. They have reciprocity between some states. Okay, if you're in Minnesota and you take the driver's test and you don't look back before you pull out a parking space, you don't get a license. I learned all that before I take the test. Okay, then you can't use your side view mirror because it might not show who's coming. You got to turn your neck. And that's why folks in Minnesota, they can look backwards. Yeah, the peripheral vision is different because So anyway, each state has its own. So that's what people are struggling for. Even this whole business about same-sex marriage. Okay? That whole issue, whether the states decide that or whether or not, it's Supreme Court decision protects it. So that's the issue we were dealing with here on the Freedom Riders. So when we arrived here, the assumption was that once we left Birmingham, after all that ruckus and beating up people and all that kind of business, they were going to give us protection. But the governor himself did not want to interfere with, the rights of the local police departments. So here the governor himself, right? That's why he hesitated about calling out the National Guard. Now, the governor could do it. Now the mayor couldn't do it. He didn't have that authority. The U.S. government and the governor of the state could do it. Well, they actually had promised that they were going to give protection to the Freedom Riders. And they did. From Birmingham, they had helicopters, cars, all that kind of stuff. Once we hit the city limits of Montgomery, there was only one motorcycle policeman.
Wow.
Escorting a bus to this bus station. When we saw that, I stood up and I knew there was going to be a problem. This was a Saturday. And Saturday, hey, people are everybody. You know what I'm talking about? So it was kind of eerie feeling. And I stood up and I told the guardsman, he was the commander of the National Guard.
He's on the bus.
He's on the bus, all right? And they had rifles on the bus. I stood up and said, okay, I want all of you Freedom Riders to pick a partner and stick with that person no matter what happens. And the guardsman told me that he was in charge to sit down. Okay, the little skinny Lafayette. My pictures are over there so you can see how skinny I am. It's about 3 places, I believe. You'll get a chance to see it after I leave. I stood up and I looked at him and I told him, I said, you are in charge of the troops. I'm in charge of the Freedom Riders. He never had any little skinny black fellow telling him. So he was stunned. That's another, way to do it in terms of unusual behavior. Okay? So he didn't know how to react to that. Okay? I didn't fuss at him. I just explained to him that I was, in charge. He didn't know. He thought he was in charge of the Freedom Riders. Okay? But he was there because we were there. All right? Yeah. So I'd say pick a partner and stick with that partner no matter what happens. But you will not go it alone. That's that whole business of community again. You've got to be able to have that established. Okay? So once we arrived, we didn't realize until later that they had actually blocked off